I'm Adrian Pragad, and I study at Manchester Art, and this is my final collection. Ili is a word from the mountain regions in the Philippines, which translates as home village, and refers to one's place of origin. In the mountain regions of the Philippines, indigenous communities thrive, but them and their culture are invisible to most. I really wanted to exhibit their craft with their textile process of weaving. Looking into Bridget Riley's mathematical artworks inspired my ideas of weaving, which led me to envision weaving in an engineered way to create an optical effect. To create the weave samples, I started panicking each weave panel, which would then be sewn, turned inside out and pressed before putting the panels together. This was often time consuming and could take hours or days in constructing larger pieces, but ultimately it was a rewarding process.
For the concept of my collection, I've been working on nostalgic seaside memories. I researched into my childhood and my parents' childhood of visiting the seaside on family day trips, looking into the 70s and the silhouettes that was used to gain garment research. I also looked into swimming pools and sports courts and using the lines within my garments to manipulate fabric and create a contemporary twist on garments that reflect nostalgic seaside memories. I'd say that my process is more about finding a garment or a research strand and then responding to that on the stand by draping and experimenting to see what works and what doesn't work.
Before creating my collection, I went to where I feel at home, where I'm from, to get my inspiration. So I journeyed back to Scotland looking for a muse. I find my four Marys, Mary Queen of Scots and her three handmaidens. For this collection I used a warm colour palette to represent the warm love that the four Marys had for each other, a romantic unity between the four women. I used solely silks and leather for my collection to represent the beauty of their lives, the landscapes and the beautiful surroundings that they lived in. This juxtaposed with the struggles that they had to endure in their lives. For the silhouettes of my looks, I took a lot of inspiration from the 16th century Scottish and French dress, and this was a really good base for my collection.
The research for my collection began in Florence. I studied in particular one woman from the Medici family, which is a royal family. They're a really important family in terms of Renaissance artwork and architecture, and the city of Florence wouldn't be the way it is without them. A lot of things that I saw in museums and stuff were peeling and fading away frescoes, so I sort of found myself to be quite inspired by them. I was experimenting how I could kind of give that worn effect to any of my textiles. I ended up doing it mainly with my knits through blending yarns and creating a sort of fading or effect on punch card designs. I've used a lot of textile techniques in my work, and I think that's what brings it a lot of life.
我的主题是以完美的身体作为起点，转变成 dress and undress 这个主题，以胖女孩这部电影作为灵感的来源，胖瘦的姐妹作为灵感的 muse 来制作和打印布料。Carry Return 使用松紧带来捆绑自身的身体，于是我使用松紧带这元素大量的使用在我的作品中。在我的作品里，可以看见大量打开并没有完全缝合的地方，例如我的西装外套。我希望借由这个没有缝合的地方，可以看见里面的事物。里面有可能是夸张凸起的裙摆，也可能是真正的身体。来结合我的主题 Dress and Undress。夸张的裙摆象征着臃肿的身体，没有想办法去掩饰，而是运用我觉得美的手法将其展现出来，配合以疤痕、伤疤为元素的布料，或也可以看见真实的身体。我想去打破对美的定义，以及 不完美也可以勇敢地展现这个想法在我的作品当中。
My work, it mainly looks at 1940s female domestication and military. I take inspiration mainly from menswear, from nostalgia, from generic items and garments. I love working leather as it's just high quality, practical, and it just has that longevity to it. I focus on the idea of protection quite a lot, so the properties of leather just work absolutely perfectly. And the craftsmanship is really important to me, as I want these garments to last longer than a lifetime. Like garments that just get better with age, that can be passed through the generations. And I guess that is my take on sustainability.
My project took initial inspiration from some of my favourite Tim Burton films, and then merging that darker aesthetic with the beauty of nature to try and achieve an almost haunting but soft appearance to my collection. I have been working on creating patterns and motifs inspired by my own nature and flower photography. This has informed my surface decoration in the form of print and embroidery. I've managed to manipulate and distort the pleating to emphasise areas of the garments to achieve an almost bobbled effect, and what I love about this technique is that the size and shape and quantity of the bobbles can actually be changed and manipulated to create different looks and emphasise different areas of the body. I also love the fact that it requires a lot of manual work. It's done by hand because for me that creates more of a connection to the garment.
Within my practice there's always been a real focus on identity and the narratives that you can tell within that. Taking a conceptual approach, I'm able to illustrate these narratives sort of into a design process that works for me. Within my final collection I was really inspired by Doncaster, a former working class town. The men there sort of have all followed the same trajectory and been left jobless since the deindustrialisation of Britain in the 80s.
My name is COUNE. My collection is called Drama of the Self. It was first inspired by Belgian artists from the 17th but also the 20th century, contemporary feminist artists and the human anatomy. So when designing garments, I like to work organically from samples, so create samples with different texture using different types of yarns and techniques. And then I like to design my garments around those textiles I create. So using a felted fabric and use different pattern cutting methods to create shape on the body, or work directly on the stand with my sample and hand sew to take that 2D piece of fabric and give it a more sculptural shape. Through this collection I really wanted to use new and innovative ways of using knit and texture in garments.
My concept is mainly inspired by objects in my surroundings, such as objects I own or that I see in stores. From finding objects, I take images of them and translate them into my own imagined characters that I could use within the garments I make. After finishing my drawings, I chose the one I liked the most and translated that into a print. I decided to utilize my own personal experience and took inspiration from the Malaysian style of casual. In Malaysia, many people don't have to be dressed in jeans and more outgoing style clothes just to go shopping. Many people dress in casual clothes such as simple shorts and cotton or jersey clothing that can be worn in and out. And so the idea in mind that many t-shirts has printed designs or logos all over the shirt, I decided to do the same but with my kawaii print style, and it was more effective for me to create a simple garment so that my prints would stand out more.
My work entails the exploration and research into technology in benefit of the creative design process. The main technology which I have focused on for this project is a form of artificial intelligence
called a generative adversarial network. The function of this in the context of my work is to train the network on images of fashion or garments, and then for it to reproduce and create new images based off of those. Part of my process entails the recontextualization of the images that are output. I have scanned looks that have been created in through photogrammetry and then turned them into wearable augmented reality filters which could be deployed over Instagram and worn by models. I have explored bespoke forms of tailoring but have moved towards more ready-to-wear techniques.
My final collection is centred around male self-expression. The aim of the project was to look at and challenge male stereotypes. I started by looking at blue-collar workers as symbols of sort of old ideals of pure masculinity, and then contrasted that with my own experiences of self-expression as an aerial artist. During a performance, you sort of wrap yourself into the fabric and you become part of the knot, and the macrame is a translation of that, learning to use hand knotting and handcrafted textile techniques. The latex draws from protective garments found in my research, and then also transparency through fabric and having nowhere to hide in your self-expression.
This project is called A Nostalgic Future and has largely been inspired by a recent trip to Turkey and includes some of my own photographs I took whilst I was there. The project is also focused around Tokyo streetwear. I was particularly interested in how there's multiple layers and you often see women wearing lingerie as outerwear. The Japanese Lolita subculture also inspired a lot of this project, as I discovered that they dress that way as a way of escaping adult life and pressures. I like to start my projects by styling garments on the stand or on the body to create interesting layers and silhouettes. I also started to consider texture. As being a knitwear designer, texture is very important to me. For this project, I was working a lot with monofilament, which is like a plastic see-through yarn, and I used it to create sheer layers where parts of the skin or other fabrics and textures could be seen underneath.
My name is Emily Tong, and my graduate collection is called The New Towns. The New Towns was a phenomenon of the 1950s post-war Britain, when the government began to try and rebuild the homes lost during the war. For women, it meant that they were trapped in lives of the domestic while their husbands were away at work. The sad reality which faced these women became a starting point for a dystopian world I've built for my final collection, using it to form the basis of a horror film. I particularly enjoy using menswear garments to create a lot of volume by deconstructing the pieces and then reinterpreting them on the stand. Alongside this silhouette development, I work a lot on print design, which is my specialism on the course. I like to use a lot of traditional techniques such as screen printing, which is intermixed with a lot of technical development on Photoshop and playing with imagery to create interesting and forward-thinking print design.
The project was very much inspired by my upbringing and nostalgia, capturing my initial memories and experiences as a young immigrant entering this new environment. I was very much interested in the idea of a school uniform, which represents belonging. Being a second-generation immigrant, I never felt like I fit in. Techniques such as fabric manipulation and reimagining of materials are a creative way of exploring materiality. I think when looking at my designs, I don't think it's derivative of any culture, but I like to think of it as a documentation of my past identity.
Hi, my name's Anna. I'm a final year student at Manchester Metropolitan University. I study fashion design and technology and I specialise in menswear design. I basically looked at traditional menswear standards within the office. It's all about this new consumer that doesn't want to wear a suit to work and shouldn't have to, because that doesn't always mean that you're smart. I think that sustainability and technology really work hand in hand. Working out the print scales before, not having to print everything off, using a lay plan and an accurate lay plan to work out how much wastage there is instead of just cutting the fabric. And doing things like that really does help the design process and a manufacturing process.
For this final major project, it's all about objectifying the perfect man. It started off with the base research of, looking into what is that perfect man. So it was looking at Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, the Adonis complex, maybe even people who use body modifications to make themselves perfect. And from that research, it created this idea of the creation of my own perfect man. It was really important to of course have the correct fit, because everything's so close to the body. There's very little darts. Everything is very clean in terms of silhouettes, and so it was a lot of trial and error making sure that the patterns were correct. As the garments are collated together and become this cohesive collection, each individual garment has its own small story that encompasses the whole concept.
My collection is inspired by the life of my dad. He grew up in Jamaica and then moved to Britain after joining the British RAF as a teenager. In 2009, he sadly lost a battle to cancer, so for the past decade, I've tried to maintain my connection with him using imagery and reliving old memories. His style in all points of his life are iconic to me. He used to wear fine dapper suits when he was young, and then he used to wear kick flare trousers and tight knit jumpers, until finally wearing all camo fits, which were very loose and very laid back. For fabrication, I looked at the extreme contrasting weather between Jamaica and Britain, which inspired me to combine light airy fabrics with heavy and showerproof fabrics in the same outfits. One of the key details throughout the collection is the reverse fan stitch, which was inspired by an afro comb, which was dug up during the excavation of a club in Moss Side called the Reno. This was around in the 70s, and it was for black and mixed race people, as it was still a time where people of colour were not accepted in a lot of places. I've ended up with a collection which is very layered. It's got a bit of tailoring in, it's quite fun. The colour palette's quite muted, but it's got pops of colour, and I feel like this really represents myself and my dad.
When collaborating with DHB, originally I looked at futuristic style, make and design of garments and objects that are already in the fashion industry. From this, I then started to analyse how these characteristics can be adapted into cycling through body shape, movement and climate.
My collection, I don't want to do this anymore, but someone has to. It's loosely based on the book Please Kill Me by Gillian McCain and Legs McNeil. The book gives an oral retelling of the history of punk. Through the copious amounts of retelling, the stories in the book, retold by various icons within the punk scene, become distorted through the he say, she say. Within my collection, I wanted to bring this distortion to the actual clothes themselves.
Inspiration came heavily from my heritage and what I see as the loves of my life. Inspired by my granddad in his heavy knitted jumpers and the foggy settings of his West Yorkshire home with my beloved family. Collaged with my dad's love for Queen and the flamboyance of Freddie Mercury. Throughout my collection I have focused on oversized tailoring and adapting different fabric textures to each garment. I started with encasing fabric and bonding it together, creating silhouettes and features onto the garment through the fabric. I collaborated with a student from Manchester School of Art to provide knitted garments within my collection. The designs were joint ideas providing layered aspects. I originally specialised in menswear, but within this collection I designed and pattern cut with no gender assigned, the silhouette, texture and colour being the main attraction. The majority of the fabric used was donated industrial surplus, considering environmental and social impacts throughout my design process and collection.
I think knowing and understanding the rules of tailoring, or at least having a good idea of them, is key when it comes to distorting shape and creating interesting tailored silhouettes. For this project, I attempted to translate Francis Bacon's painting processes into the processes used by bespoke tailors to create an experimental piece of clothing. For example, he painted on an easel, so I drafted a traditional jacket on a wall, and then after, in thick paint, traced over it freely with added volume. And when the jacket didn't fit, I slashed it and made it fit, which is something Bacon did to his paintings when things didn't go well. Working like Francis Bacon, who painted instinctively, is kind of make or break. It can destroy your work, or it can make it 1,000 times more interesting.
The body will achieve what the mind believes, therefore my concept is connecting two beautiful processes of mental and physical strength through the world of boxing and LGBTQA community. Both have been beaten, both knocked down. This collection is about their fight and how they champion their current worlds.
Hi, I'm Mia and I study sportswear design at Manchester Metropolitan. For my final project, I wanted to create a thought-provoking piece that questioned sustainability and the future of our planet. Using information I found at the London Design Museum with an exhibition entitled Moving to Mars, I looked into the potential of a new life on a different planet, and I designed my collection around this. If humanity was to inhabit a new planet, sustainability would be a key issue. I wanted to make my collection futuristic, but incorporating everything that I see wrong with the fashion industry at the moment. The main thing being the sustainability aspect. This is what brought Chloe 3D into my work. This software allows you to work both 2D and 3D, amending patterns and checking fit on a virtual avatar. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak, Chloe became ever more important within my work as I was removed from studio atmosphere and was left making all of my design decisions on a screen. I was able to create part of my final collection without any access to machinery and just for using my laptop. Using Chloe 3D, I could even incorporate fabric details such as mesh and stretch materials into my lineup, showing exactly how they would fit in a real-life scenario, down to even cover stitch detailing on all the seams. With Chloe 3D being such a new software, I think it is extremely important that students are taught this so that when I go into industry, I'm able to implement a new and more sustainable way of working.
Hi, I'm Joseph Duffil. I do Womenswear design at Manchester Fashion Institute.
The concept for my F&P is based around 1920s and 30s trims, paired back with a utilitarian approach. I paired both utility and the whimsical aesthetic together to hopefully solidate the marriage between both strength and beauty in the modern world.
The garments in this collection's main focus is the textile surface, in which represents an older woman's aging body. a 3D effect was created in the fabric to imitate wrinkles. All bonding is directed vertically to follow the human body's natural skin grain. The colour of the silk velvet has a luxurious shine when the light hits, which is the reason I decided to make a coordinated full set. The different body movements show the colour of the velvet and the laser etching hitting the light in different ways and creating a subtle yet powerful statement through the contrast.
My collection is inspired by artist John Chamberlain, whose sculptures were created by crushing discarded car parts into 3D shapes. My work focuses on technical pattern cutting, so echoing John Chamberlain's sculptures, I've crushed and sculpted garments and manipulated the form of the body through cut to show that fashion can be viewed as sculptures in a living form. I've also incorporated drape points onto patterns to allow experimentation with drape and design. The garments were intentionally designed to last. It was really important for me to create luxury and high quality garments that are classic yet creatively cut, and that were made with quality fabrics and high-end finishing, which all improve the longevity of the garments.
I called my final collection Future Mythologies, and it explores the evolution of life after crisis through fashion and through innovation. In this project, I wanted to create a future scenario where the Earth's environment is devastated by nuclear interference and climate change, and I've considered how new life might actually mutate and evolve in these futuristic atmospheric conditions. This influenced me to develop really quite alien silhouettes, merging animal features together to create these new hybrids. I consider it to be so important to incorporate sustainable practices into my work. I saw how 3D printing had influenced more sustainable manufacture in other industries, and this made me begin to think how 3D print could be used to innovate production in the embellishment industry too. I began to experiment using 3D printing and created a way of emulating the glossy finish of sequins, but in a more sustainable way. One of the benefits of 3D printing is that it's an additive way of manufacturing, which means that embellishing fabrics using the technology is zero waste as only the material needed is used. The sequins have been 3D printed using recycled PLA, which is a bioplastic and a more eco-friendly alternative to PET plastic, which is currently used to make most sequins.
My final collection is a therapeutic clothing range aimed at reducing anxiety, stress and depression. My collection name Panacea comes from the Greek goddess of universal healing and remedy.
My collection is inspired by Halimakasso's sculptures, elements of sportswear, and African print. I mainly focused on Halimakasso's collection called Virtues of Unity, which features sculptures with different sized holes. My aim for this collection was to combine my love of womenswear and sportswear, embracing freedom from convention and rules with a modern take on classic silhouettes. Layering was an important aspect in the collection, from layered sleeves to layered trousers and to combining different garments together such as the puffer trench coat. Some of Halimakasso's work features line detail inspired by African surface prints, so I decided to develop my own print. Half of the color palette in the collection is inspired by the 1980s-90s tracksuits, which was the bright turquoise and teal. The other half of the color palette, the browns and yellow in the collection, was inspired by colors from African prints.
My final collection concept took inspiration from the 1930s original power shoulder to the 1980s power dressing. The pink palette and fabric selection is the conclusion of my research and development. It nods to the perception people have on the colour pink and the colour representation in today's society. Asymmetry and strong silhouettes showcase the complex yet quiet tailoring that are intended to complement an existing sophisticated wardrobe. The final outerwear garments I chose to make were each powerful, with no two sides being the same and unique in their own way. If you feel power within, then power is projected.
As a part of overall silhouette, this concept, bad and lazy, are the starting point to develop my silhouette. I inspired by the words bad, comfort, relaxed, and lazy. The coat shapes reflected that mood, like the puff and ruffles, also wrap over all of the body, made out of the quilted fabric. The suit and dress reflect the daily dress code. My virtual research on fabric inspiration, they can reflect how people feel comfort when they really chill on the bed. So fabric like silk and quilted are the best choice for this collection.